A very good morning, dear students. Today in this video lecture, we are going to study about basic terms that are used in epidemiology. This is the second lecture in continuation with our previous lecture. So let's start with isolation. Isolation is the oldest communicable disease control measure. It is defined as separation for the period of communicability of infected person or animal from others in such places and under such conditions as to prevent or limit the direct or indirect transmission of infectious agent from those infected to those who are susceptible or who may spread the agent to others. In general, infection from human, animal sources can be controlled by physical isolation of the case or carrier and its necessary treatment until free from infection, provided cases and carrier can be easily identified and carrier rates are low. Isolation may also be achieved in some disease by ring immunization, that is encircling the infected person with a barrier of immune person through whom the infection is unable to spread. This method, when applied worldwide in the 1960s and 1970s, eradicated smallpox. In North America, ring immunization is being applied in measles control and eradication. The duration of isolation is determined by the duration of communicability of the disease and the effect of chemotherapy on infectivity. Now let's start with the mode of transmission. Before starting this topic, we must know what is disease transmission. Disease transmission is the passing of a communicable disease from an infected host individual or group to conspecific individual or group, regardless of whether the other individual was previously infected. Here in this chart, you can see the dynamic of disease transmission. The source of reservoir, mode of transmission, susceptible host. सो यहाँ से क्या पता चल रहा है? सबसे पहले सोर्स ऑफ रिजर्वर, ये एक ऐसा सोर्स होता है जो उस डिजीज़ को या उस कंडीशन को कैरी कर रहा है, और दूसरे में है मोड ऑफ ट्रांसमिशन. अब वो एज अ कैरियर उसको ट्रांसमिट करता है दूसरे पर्सन पे, तो वो किस तरीके से करेगा उसको ट्रांसमिट, तो वो जो मेथड्स होंगे, वो जो मोड्स होंगे, वो आएंगे मोड्स ऑफ ट्रांसमिशन के अंडर. और जो तीसरा है वो है ससेप्टेबल होस्ट. अब इसमें होस्ट वो है जिसकी इम्यूनिटी वीक है, या फिर वो पर्सन जिस पे वो डिजीज़ जो है वो ट्रांसमिट होगी. ठीक है, तो उसको हम बोलेंगे ससेप्टेबल होस्ट। अब जो मोड ऑफ ट्रांसमिशन है वो दो टाइप की होगी, एक होगी डायरेक्ट ट्रांसमिशन और एक होगी इनडायरेक्ट ट्रांसमिशन। जो डायरेक्ट ट्रांसमिशन है उसमें डायरेक्ट कांटेक्ट होता है, इसमें ड्रॉपलेट के थ्रू इन्फेक्शन हो सकती है, इसमें इनोकुलेशन हो सकती है स्किन पे या फिर म्यूकोजा पे, या फिर ट्रांसप्लांटल हो सकता है जो कि वर्टिकल है। इनडायरेक्ट ट्रांसमिशन, इसमें व्हीकल क्या होता है, एक बोर्न होती है, वेक्टर क्या होता है, बोर्न होता है, एक मैकेनिकल या फिर बायोलॉजिकल, दो हो सकते हैं वेक्टर्स। अंडर एयरबोर्न कम्स ड्रॉपलेट न्यूक्लियर एंड डस्ट। The fourth point is formite. Fifth one is unclean hands and fingers. Direct transmission comes under skin to skin, that is skin of the host, skin of the carrier to the host, mucosa to mucosa, mucosa to skin, that is kissing, touching, intercourse can cause AIDS, leprosy, leptospirosis, skin and eye infection. Droplet infection, under this the particle size is 5 nanomillimeter. The spread distance is limited to 30 to 60 centimeter between source and host. Examples are TB, influenza, meningococcal meningitis, whooping cough, etc. What is an outbreak? It's the occurrence of more cases of disease than expected in a given area over a particular period of time among a specific group of people. Occurrence of two or more epidemiologically linked cases of a disease of outbreak potential. A single case of a new emerging disease or eradicated disease. Outbreak and epidemic. Outbreak. Outbreaks are usually limited to small area. Outbreaks are usually within one district or few blocks. Epidemic. An epidemic covers large geographic area. Epidemics usually linked to control measures on a district, state wide basis. Use a word or the other according to whether you want to generate or deflect attention. Sources of information to detect outbreaks: event based surveillance, rumor registered, to be kept in standardized format in each institution, community informants, private and public sector. Media, important source of information not to be neglected. Case based surveillance, review of routine data, Review the data from the routine surveillance and check if it crosses threshold level. Trigger events. Early warning signals for an outbreak. Clustering of cases, increases in cases or death, single case of disease of epidemic potential, acute febrile illness of an unknown etiology, two or more cross linked cases of meningitis, measles, unusual isolate, shifting in age distribution of cases, high vector density, natural disasters. This now let's study about quarantine. What is quarantine and how it originated? Let's start. This was practiced as a measure of disease prevention related to the Black Death. Between 1348 and 1359, the Black Death wiped out about 30% of Europe's population as well as a significant percentage of Asia. The original document from 1377, which is kept in the archives of Dubrovnik state, that before entering the city, newcomers had to spend 30 days Argentine in a restricted location, originally nearby island, waiting to see whether the symptoms of Black Death would develop. Later on, isolation was prolonged to 40 days and was called quarantine. A multilateral international sanitary convention was concluded at Paris on 17th January 1912. The convention was most comprehensive and was designated to replace all previous conventions on that matter. It was signed by 40 countries and consisted of 160 articles. Ratifications by 16 of the signatories were exchanged in Paris on 7 October 1920. Another multilateral convention was signed in Paris on 21st June 1926 to replace that of 1912. It was signed by 58 countries worldwide and consisted of 172 articles. Now let's study what is isolation. It's the separation of a person with infectious disease from contact with other human beings for the period of communicability. Next is incubation period. The incubation period is defined as the time between exposure to the onset of symptoms or other signals of infection. Diseases have incubation period that vary widely. Now the next topic is mortality and morbidity. So let's start. Mortality is the condition of being mortal or susceptible to death. We can also say that it's the opposite of immortality. Now, where can we use the mortality data? Let's study. In explaining trends and differential in overall mortality, indicating priorities for health action and allocation of resources, in designing intervention program and assessment and monitoring of public health problems and programs, gives clues for epidemiological research. Now let's continue with morbidity. Morbidity has been defined as any departure, subjective or objective, from a state of physiological well being. The problem is equivalent to such terms as sickness, illness, disabilities, etc. The World Health Organization Expert Committee on Health Statistics noted in its sixth report that morbidity could be measured in terms of three units: a person who is ill, B, the illness that these persons experienced, and the duration of this illness. The value of morbidity data is summarized as: they describe the nature and extent of the disease load in the community and thus assist in the establishment of priorities. They usually provide more comprehensive and more accurate and clinical relevant information on patient characteristics. They act as starting point for etiological studies and thus play a crucial role in disease prevention. They are needed for monitoring and evaluation of disease control activities. Morbidity indicators. To describe health in terms of mortality is misleading. This is because the mortality indicators do not reveal the burden of ill health in a community. As for example, mental illness and rheumatoid arthritis. Therefore, morbidity indicators are used to supplement mortality data to describe the health status of population. Morbidity statistics have also their own drawback. They tend to overlook a large number of conditions which are subclinical or inapparent, that is the hidden part of the iceberg of diseases.